Hey everyone, thanks so much for clicking on this video. You're going to find me here on YouTube and you're going to find me on Rumble. Today I'm going to talk to someone. I'm very keen to talk to this person. We're going to talk about vaccines, as I do quite often, and we're going to talk about his vaccine injury. So I'm going to upload this to YouTube, although they're very hot on censorship. So you can find this interview there, but you'll also be able to find this interview on Rumble. And I really tip my hat to Rumble because they are a censorship-free platform. They allow free speech, they allow free thought, and it's wonderful. So you'll find this interview on both channels, hopefully. Now, the guy I'm going to talk to, I'm excited to talk to him because he's a BC guy. He's born and raised here like myself. We're born and bred BC people. This is a BC story. This is home. This is what's happened. Today, we're going to talk to Shaun Mulldoon. He's works in the construction industry. He has a construction supply business. And he did not have a good time with his Astra-Zeneca vaccine. I mean, he rolled up his sleeve. He did what he was told. And it didn't work out so well. And now he's in a documentary. It's called Vaccine Induced. It's a short documentary. It's only 30 minutes. It's worth watching. It's worth your time. It's an important story. So before we get to Shaun, I'm just going to play you a little clip from the documentary.
I can reinforce once again that every single vaccine available in Canada has been approved by Health Canada as being both safe and effective.
If they're going to encourage this, ensure that it's safe, then I wasn't going to start questioning. I didn't feel like I was in a place to question it. I don't have the appropriate education to even form an opinion on it based on 17 years in construction supply.
Getting that shot really was an amazing feeling. It hits you.
Did you cry?
It was like I thought I was going in for a vitamin B12 shot. I absolutely never for a second thought that they'd inject me with something that might potentially kill me, which is exactly what they did.
Welcome. Welcome, Shaun. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. What does it feel like when you see that again? Does it bring it all back or?
Yeah, I've relived it a lot of times. And so it's actually, I think because I've told my story enough times and I'm familiar with it, and even in the filming the documentary, it's actually harder on my wife to see it. My wife has a hard time. Because
definitely.
It's
harder for the people that love you.
Yeah, so I know it was a bit of an, I shouldn't say arduous process. I don't know anything about filmmaking or documentary making. And so me and Rob, the filmmaker, he just bossed me around and told me to stare at things. And that was basically my job, was to stare at stuff in the distance. And so I'm quite familiar with it through the editing that he did and whatnot. But then when my wife saw it for the first time, it was difficult for her.
Yeah. So tell people a little bit about yourself. Well, basically, you were injured by the AstraZeneca vaccine. If you could just tell people a little bit about your process. Like, you took the vaccine. What happened in the days after?
Right. So in April of last year, I went in and I got my jab. It was April 22nd. And the only one available at the time was Astra-Zeneca. Now, I didn't actually know much about the vaccines, to be honest. I hadn't paid a lot of attention. I work full time and I coach my kids baseball and stuff like that. So I wasn't scared of the vaccines. I didn't care which one they gave me. I just went and got my poke. And then about 10 days later, I just went from having abdominal pain, started throwing up. I called my doctor and talked to him about it. And it just persisted day after day. And the doctor kind of said, well, just keep an eye on it. And after about 5 days, I called him back and I said, it's not getting better. And he said, okay, we'll give it another day or two. And I said, I got vaccinated about a week and a half ago. And he said, oh, no, it's very unlikely that it could have anything to do with the vaccine. That's very, very rare that there could be a side effect. And then I ended up deteriorating very quickly. And I ended up the next day, I was passing blood and I was throwing up. I'd been in a lot of pain for the whole week. It was a rough week. I spent the whole week in bed and I wasn't really eating. And so when I got to the hospital, they did some imaging. I don't actually recall a whole lot because it was I was in a phenomenal amount of pain at this point, like I didn't know what was going on around me. I don't know what the nurses looked like or the doctors looked like or anything. But I ended up having an emergency surgery at about 3 a.m. They had to assemble a team at 2 a.m. And it was actually an exploratory surgery because there was something wrong with my intestines, and they just had to go in and find out. I've been told exploratory surgeries don't happen. That's not something that we do anymore. But the emergency room doctor just he actually, when he contacted the surgeon and said we need to cut this guy open, the surgeon said, "Can we do it tomorrow?" Being like Sunday the next day, and he said, "No, we don't have that kind of time." And so,
Wow.
yeah, I had a blood clot in my portal vein, and my intestines were effectively dying, and some they were gone, too far gone to recover. And so you can imagine, I went into the hospital with a stomach ache and in a lot of pain. And the next day I woke up when I came out of surgery and was told that I'd lost about half my small intestine, just over 2 meters of my small intestine due to this blood clot. I didn't have any of the markers for blood clotting. I was on 0 medication. I was active and, well, relatively active and relatively healthy. I like my beers and my pizza, but so they had to start doing an investigation into what had caused this blood clot. And a couple of days later, like, they kept finding more blood clots. They found blood clots in both my lungs. They found blood clots in my spleen, in my abdomen. So it felt like each day I was in the ICU, they were finding more blood clots. And one of the doctors approached me and said, "We've got the investigation that was done by McMaster University out in Ontario. They've finished their investigation, and this was caused by your vaccine." So I've been diagnosed now with vaccine-induced immune thrombotic thrombocytopenia, which, vaccine-induced is pretty, self-explanatory. So thrombotic is just blood clots, and thrombocytopenia is low platelets. And so what's happened since I got my vaccine, I'm producing these antibodies now that activates my platelets, and your platelets are supposed to clot. That's what they're supposed to do. But now my body is effectively creating these antibodies that send my platelets into like overdrive. And I was effectively clotting up. People who are diagnosed with VIT don't live very long if they don't get treatment. Now, the doctors have never dealt with this in history. It didn't exist before Astra-Zeneca. I couldn't Google it. I couldn't Google what I had. There was 0 results.
Like when you went in there, nobody in the documentary, you were starting to say nobody wanted to speak about the fact that, hey, I had my vaccine a few days ago. Like, it was an unspoken thing. And one nurse tried to say something, and then people started to say we shouldn't be talking like this. What were you thinking at the time? Were you putting the two together? You're like, you know what? I just had this, so this must be what it was. Or were you like, well, no, it can't be this?
I was kind of in denial still as well. I wasn't ready to just say this was the vaccine until there was some sort of concrete evidence. I didn't know what to think. And I was talking to somebody about my injury, and one of the nurses heard and kind of like went to stop me and said, no, we're not talking like that. We don't know anything. And I said, it was confirmed. They told me yesterday, a team of doctors came to my bedside and like told me that the investigation was done and that this was a vaccine injury. It was caused by the vaccine. And she kind of went, oh, like you could see she didn't want it to be the vaccine. My surgeon, like I received phenomenal care. I just want to start with that. People give Langley a hard time, Langley Memorial Hospital. The ICU staff were absolutely amazing. Like the amount of people that were just doing everything they could.
That's the impression I got in the documentary, that you weren't you weren't angry. You could see that people were busting their bottoms trying to help you, and so that's nice to hear. But the thing that's problematic is not having the proper diagnosis and having this be a mystery. I would like to know, as a person, I think you probably know my story too. I worked at Global News for a long time, and I was badgering people to be to tell the other side of the story, because I knew that this vaccine hadn't been used in humans ever. I knew about the clinical trials. I knew we weren't reporting so many things. And every time I tried to bring things up, I kept getting told to shut up, or I got suspended, or I got in major trouble. And they made me feel like a crazy person. I would like to know what you think of how much do you think the news affected your decision to get vaccinated, or did the news give you pressure?
And they were telling us on the news that young people were having COVID, but they were asymptomatic. You know, like we had to wear masks at the time because we might have COVID and not even know it. That's how mild the COVID symptoms were. And this was before vaccines. This was before Omicron. We were being told people were having asymptomatic COVID. I wasn't really worried about COVID, but I didn't want to give COVID to my parents. You know, I didn't want to be the one that got COVID and I gave it to my parents who are in their 70s and maybe put their safety or their health at risk. So now knowing that the vaccines don't stop transmission is even more frustrating.
It's
because
so
that's
devastating.
the reason I did it. I did it to protect my parents. I did it to protect my family.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually do that. After this happened to me, especially after my experience in the hospital and having heard so many comments, like negative comments about the vaccines, I came out very hesitant. I came out very scared of vaccines. Not from the media, not from YouTube, not from Rumble, and not from, you know, stuff that I saw online. This is from conversations with doctors, conversations with nurses and health professionals. By the time I left the hospital, I left and I did not ever want another COVID vaccine.
How many jabs did you have?
Just the one.
Just the one.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, just the one. So that also means that when you had just the one, when the passports came about, then what happened to you? Then you're not considered fully vaccinated.
No, I was considered unvaccinated despite the fact that my vaccination had very nearly killed me. And so when I finally went home, it had been about 2 months. And it was only a matter of like a month and a half later, coming into September, they were talking about the passport. And because I was considered, I didn't have two, I was considered unvaccinated. I'd had my doctor and my hematologist say, no more jabs for the time being. You're not putting any more in your body. So I called my hematologist, said, hey, can I please get an exemption? Thinking it would be like a straightforward, simple thing. Like the vaccine almost killed him. The doctor said no more. Sure, of course I'm going to get an exemption, right? Well, she gets back and says, sorry, Shaun, you're not eligible for one. You're supposed to go get an mRNA. And I was...
Can you believe that? Can we just absorb that piece of information for a second? Yeah. You're not the only person I've interviewed that has had one jab and nearly died, went to get an exemption, and then the person said, no, you can't have one.
Yeah.
Well, what of that? What do you make of that in terms of a government looking after its own people? Like,
well, you know what
is that?
I really struggle with it because I know there's this like blanket statement across all of Canada or the province that has very, very few people that are eligible for an exemption. But to have a doctor that's treating me directly in the hospital, to have my hematologist who's treating me directly, they've got my file in front of them every day. They're looking at it and they're saying, we don't think it's safe for you to get another jab right now, at least, even if we want to defer it, you know, let's get the exemption for the time being. To have them advocate for you not to get it. And like, I didn't approach them and say, I don't want any more vaccines. Can you give me? They approached me and said, no more jabs. And so to know there's some blanket statement somewhere that somebody in Ontario or Ottawa said, oh, no, he's not eligible. They've never seen my file. They've never met me. It's just, I don't fall within the protocol. There's no common sense. Nobody's thinking about it. Nobody's actually looking at my file and making a decision. And so it was in December. Another woman in Squamish, she also had VIT. And so she was terrified of getting another jab after her hospitalization and whatnot. She had a similar story to mine, only they caught hers before she lost any internal organs or anything like that. She reached out to me because she was trying to get an exemption or deferral or something. And we both kind of submitted letters. CBC actually interviewed us and did a bit of a, they did a little story on us.
Did they do an honest story?
I felt a little misrepresented, but they just kind of said we were trying to get an exemption. We weren't able to, despite our injuries. But then assured everybody that we knew the vaccines were safe and that we were going to get more just as soon as we knew it was safe. It's kind of how they spun it.
But Shaun, as a result, you couldn't go, like, say it's Mother's Day. You can't go out for Mother's Day dinner. You can't go to a movie. You can't do this because you don't have an exemption. And these ridiculous passports, as you can tell, I don't agree with this at all. I think the government did you wrong and did thousands of people wrong. And you deserve an apology. They should get down on their knees and apologize to you. So should the media. And one thing I want to say is that in the documentary, you said that you felt guilty that you had done this to yourself. You have not done this to yourself. I want you to be free of that guilt in a way. You didn't do this to yourself. You did what you were told based on what you were, what we said
Yeah.
on the TV, and you went on and got this, trying to do your part. And they let you down. So those people should feel guilty. Whoever denied you that exemption, the global news, who I used to work for, they owe you an apology. They should be feeling guilty and hanging their heads in shame. That's how strongly I feel about it, because it's an injustice, is it not? What has happened?
Do you know what? Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I said, it was after my injury that I really struggled with the media, because there was just this onslaught of safe and effective, this little catchphrase. I don't even know what the definition of safe is, or the definition of effective, because it doesn't stop you from getting COVID. It doesn't stop you from spreading COVID. So they say it's effective, but they never kind of told us what that determines exactly, or what is safe exactly. What do you consider safe? I don't know how they determine what is safe. I saw a lot of doctors, probably 20, 30 doctors over the 2 months I was in there. I've lost track of them all. And another doctor told me the same stat. And he says, they're finding it might even be 1 in 50,000. And I'm thinking 1 in 50,000 and 1 in 250,000 are two dramatically different numbers as far as safe goes, and, adverse events. And then another doctor. And then I got transferred to Surrey, another doctor. I go back to the hospital. I deteriorated after being discharged. I ended up back in the hospital because I had very little intestine. So I couldn't maintain my weight. I couldn't stay hydrated. My body was kind of not working very well and shutting down. I'm back in the hospital in January. Another doctor tells me the same statistic, to the point that I was getting tired of hearing the statistic. I was starting to feel like really stupid about what I'd done. That this information was wrong. We were given incorrect information on the safety of vaccines. And so that was really, really eating at me. That it's all about informed consent and feeling like you're making the right choice, and the information you gain from doctors is correct. And now I've had this parade of doctors all tell me that the information was wrong. And that was hard. Like, even it was like day 4 after my surgery, and provinces across Canada started saying they were going to stop giving out first doses of Astra-Zeneca due to blood clot risk. So when you're in the ICU and you're cut up and you're a complete disaster, and like I said, I was so guilt-ridden and medicated, and like I was breaking down every time I thought about my family in the hospital. And then all of a sudden, we're not going to give it out anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm just some fluke, right? Like, it's safe. You said it was safe. I was just some unfortunate fluke. What do you mean you're going to stop giving it out? And then all across Canada, all of a sudden they were saying, instead of getting an AstraZeneca, maybe get a Pfizer or a Moderna for your second one. And then AstraZeneca just disappeared. It's like we gave it out for a month or a month and a half, and they realized this is too dangerous.
I feel angry on your behalf, because that's because Trudeau said, take the first one you can get.
The advice given by health professionals, the advice that I gave, was that the right vaccine for you is the very first vaccine that is offered. And Health Canada continues to ensure the safety and effectiveness of any vaccine administered in Canada. As we've seen over the past number of weeks, there are different recommendations and limitations given in as the science evolves.
I wanted people to know my pain. The people responsible for this, I wanted them to suffer. And I felt horrible about the fact, I didn't realize it was subconscious, when there's this anger inside you, and this frustration and this bitterness, it's not a conscious thing, but I'd see, Justin or Bonnie or anybody, every time I heard on the radio, I come listen to the radio, go get your vaccines, they're safe and effective, aren't they wonderful? And I was so angry about what had happened to me, that I needed to, I talked to my counselor and I said, I don't like this. I'm wishing ill on people. And I knew that was a really negative sign. And I'm not that person. I don't want people to suffer. Even they're trying to find statistics on if you've had 4 or 5, does that actually change anything? Because there's no study on that. You can't just pull up some research and say, look at 5. Number 5 is what's saving lives. 4 didn't quite cut it.
I mean, whether this has some small benefit to people over 80 and you got your 2 jabs, then fine. Another thing they don't tell you is that rats that they gave the COVID vaccine to, their reproductive organs are damaged, and on and on and on it goes. And the news never told you that. So that was my frustration. And that's why I started to report on it, because I don't want people to go through this, and I don't want people to I mean, and I also don't want people to blame themselves, because when you have a little woman like Bonnie come out with her little chunky jewelry and she seems like such a mumsy little lady that's trying to help you, she's not. She's a
Yeah.
government appointed public health officer that came out and told us misinformation and lied to us. And
You know,
now where
actually, I
is
used to
she?
say that about Bonnie, how you
Yeah.
don't get into a position like Bonnie Henry's without
Yep.
being very driven, very determined. You
Yep.
need to, you don't just fall into that position because you're really nice and help people. You need to be a very aggressive type of person to get there,
Uh-huh.
right? Like
Yeah.
political, basically.
She has a military background too.
Yeah, so
She's
I
a
was
little
like, you know, she
viper.
comes across as so soft-spoken and nice and stuff, but I'm like, I bet she's actually, like, in real life, I've never met Bonnie Henry, and so I'm assuming this, but I bet she's actually relatively, like, not ferocious, but she's driven. She is there to get where she wants to go.
But what we understand is there's several different types of events that happen. So a blood clot in the lungs, a blood clot in the legs, a heart attack. And the investigators look at each individual one and make a determination of whether it's related to the vaccine or not. And there's been millions of doses, tens of millions of doses now being used in the UK, for example. And these same safety signals have not happened there. So yes, we are watching this very carefully. We do not have any of the lot numbers that were concerned in those countries. And the product that we have in British Columbia is from the Serum Institute of India right now. And there are no safety signals associated with the product we have here.
We have this horrible, like, divided community, the whole country now. I've never seen so much just like divisiveness. And the only way to move beyond that is for the media to stop portraying anybody that's unvaccinated in a negative light, for our prime minister to stop calling unvaccinated people names and asking if we tolerate them. The only way we're ever going to get back to normal, where we can all just coexist again, is for everybody to stop kind of judging people based on what their choice is of what they want to put in their body. And I don't know when we're going to get there. I don't know how long that's going to take. You know, there's been so much fear instilled in our society that I think that we're still a ways away from that. Again, I just want honest, transparent conversations. And I've said that before. Like, I'm not here to like fabricate anything. I'm not exaggerating anything. Anything that I say to you that happened to me at the hospital, this isn't stuff that I'm conjuring up, you know. This is all just an honest recount of my experiences. And so that's what we need. We need honesty. We need transparency. And we need that from our government. We need that from our media. And they shouldn't be able to pick and choose what information is appropriate for us. They should just give us all the information, and people should be allowed to make their own decision. And that's not what happened. So for us to have been informed about the risks of getting vaccinated, we should have known what it was. We should have known what GBS was. We should have been told these things could happen if you go and put this in your body. But we were never told that information. And we deserve to have been told that. And that's what is frustrating for me, is that I feel like they knew if they told us that, it would create vaccine hesitancy. So avoiding vaccine hesitancy was more important to them than giving us the honest facts about what was happening.
That's 100% right.
Yeah.
That's it. People obviously can follow you on Twitter, but you probably have enough followers now.
Yeah, no, I don't have tons of followers. I hit like 8,000 recently or something.
Oh,
so
that's
I guess
tons.
That's a fair amount. Yeah. All it took was one picture of my surgery, and all of a sudden I've had a Twitter account for 10 years. I never use it. There's zero activity, like 3 followers type of thing. And then I decided to post my injury on there. And like 2 days later, I had like 4,000 followers, and I went, whoa, what just happened?
That's how I first saw you, was that picture. And I was
Right.
like, I have to interview this man.
Yes,
This
right.
is, I saw that picture. My heart went out to you.
Oh.
That nobody should have to go through that.
Yeah.
For a little jab. So you did well to post that. And
You
you
know-
probably helped so many people, they can relate to you.
Yeah, that's one thing, and maybe I will just mention before we go here, is when you say just from a little jab, right? And so I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of needles since. You know, I was on blood thinners 2 a day, and I had blood work 4 times a day at one point. Both my elbows were just like track marked almost from all the blood work that they're taking in the hospital. And so one thing I appreciate now is that it's not a little poke. What they're putting in your body, like I've had saline solution, I've had vitamin B, I've had multivitamins, I've had all like potassium injected in. That vaccine it's not saline solution or vitamin B. That vaccine, it can change your immune system. It changes how your body functions. And they've really kind of sold it like it's no big deal. It's just this little jab, but it's not just a little jab. It's actually something very, very significant, and it changes how your body functions potentially. And so before you go and get like that jab in your arm, people need to know it's not just a little poke. It's actually something very significant that you're putting in your body. And I know I didn't appreciate that. So I had a hard time coming to terms with, I'm lying in the hospital with my intestines cut out, and I was bedridden. I've got a bedpan I'm using, and I can't even walk to the bathroom. And I'm like, how did that little poke ruin me? Like, just completely destroy my body. And it wasn't until finding about how my immune system was compromised and these antibodies that my body was producing and the blood clot risk that I realized that wasn't just a little poke. It was something much, much more significant than that.
100%. That and on that note, that's a good note to end on, and that's a good message for people and something to think about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Shaun, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me again.
Okay.
So it was a pleasure.
Okay. Pleasure. Okay. Pleasure was all mine. And best of luck to you and your family.
Yes, you too.
Okay.
All right.